In March 1918, while the world's attention was locked on the final, bloody year of World War I, a new kind of war was just beginning. This enemy was invisible, silent, and far more deadly. It would later be known as the Spanish flu, a pandemic that didn't just infect the world, it nearly killed it. Imagine the scene. Trenches carved across Europe filled with soldiers from every corner of the globe. These cramped, unsanitary conditions became the perfect launch pad for the virus. It first emerged quietly among the troops, a strange illness that struck with alarming speed. From these military camps, it hitched a ride on troop ships, trains, and supply lines, spreading like wildfire across continents. What made this flu so terrifying wasn't just its speed, but who it attacked. Unlike typical flu strains that are most dangerous to the very young and the very old, this one had a horrifying preference for the young and healthy. Men and women in the prime of their lives, the very soldiers fighting the war, were its primary targets. The symptoms were brutal and swift. It started like a common flu fever, aches, a cough. But within hours, it would escalate. A high, unrelenting fever would set in. Lungs would fill with fluid, causing victims to struggle for breath and bleed from their nose and mouth. Their skin would turn a ghastly blue-purple color from lack of oxygen, a condition called cyanosis. For many, death came within 48 hours of the first symptom. It was a swift, merciless executioner. In the midst of a global war, information was a weapon. Governments on all sides heavily censored their press to maintain public morale and avoid showing any weakness to the enemy. News of battlefield losses was controlled, and so was news of this devastating new plague. They couldn't afford to admit that their armies were being decimated by disease, so they hid the truth. But one country wasn't fighting. Spain was neutral in World War I, and its press was free to report on whatever it wanted. When the King of Spain, Alfonso XIII, fell gravely ill, Spanish newspapers covered the outbreak in detail, because Spain was the only country reporting on it openly. The world mistakenly began to call it the Spanish flu, a name that has unfairly stuck ever since. As the virus exploded globally in the fall of 1918, doctors were completely powerless. There were no vaccines to prevent it. There were no antiviral medicines to treat it. The world's medical community, armed with little more than aspirin and folk remedies, could only watch in horror as their patients drowned in their own beds. The sheer number of sick and dying overwhelmed hospitals. Temporary morgues were set up in ice rinks and warehouses. In many places, there weren't enough healthy people left to dig graves or make coffins. Panic swept through cities. To slow the spread, authorities imposed drastic measures that feel eerily familiar today. Entire cities shut down. Theaters, dance halls, and schools were closed. Public gatherings were banned. In many places, wearing a face mask became mandatory, with fines for anyone caught without one. Signs appeared everywhere. Spit spreads death. Society ground to a halt as people isolated themselves, afraid of their neighbors, afraid of the very air they breathed. By the time the pandemic finally receded in 1920, the scale of the devastation was almost incomprehensible. Estimates suggest that the Spanish flu infected about a third of the U.S. population and killed between 50 and 100 million people. To put that in perspective, that's more deaths than World War I and World War II combined. It was the single deadliest pandemic in modern history. But out of this unimaginable tragedy, crucial lessons were learned. The world was forced to reckon with its own vulnerability. The catastrophe spurred the creation of centralized public health systems in many countries. It revolutionized the way we track and respond to infectious diseases, laying the foundation for modern epidemiology. The Spanish flu was a brutal, bloody lesson in the importance of transparency, global cooperation, and preparedness. It serves as a chilling reminder from history that nature's power can far exceed our own, and that when we ignore the warnings, the price is always paid in human lives. Thanks for watching. If you found this dive into history interesting, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more stories that shaped our world. See you next time.